Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast presented by Onyx. On this episode, we are joined by Steve Sherk of Sherk's Guide Service. Steve guides and hunts the big woods public land in northern Pennsylvania with great success. Steve and I talk about shed hunting as it relates to these big woods mountain bucks. We dive into when you should start shed hunting, the types of areas to find sheds, how to shed hunt an area, big woods food sources, utilizing trail cameras, and much more. This is part 2 of the podcast I did with Steve a little while ago. Before we get into this, I want to share a little word from some of the sponsors of the podcast here. So the Onyx Hunt app is your premier GPS hunting app that turns your phone into a working GPS. So this time of year, I'm scouring on the maps on the desktop version of the Hunt app to look for areas to scout during the spring, as well as potential hunting locations for my annual Western hunt. The new 3D feature makes it extremely convenient to look for hidden benches and just understand the lay of the land. If you want to check out the Onyx Hunt app for yourself, head over to onyxmaps.com and use the coupon code EMW to save yourself 20%. Tethered. Tethered is a company founded on the principles of educating the hunting community on saddle hunting while creating the most innovative, lightweight, safe products for saddle hunting. I'm currently using the Phantom saddle system, which I'm giving one away if you check out the new film, which I'll give you a little more details on that here shortly. But I'm running the Phantom saddle system with the Predator platform for all of my mobile hunts. To learn more about tethered and saddle hunting, head over to tetherednation.com. Maven Optics. Maven is building the highest quality optics at half the price of their competitors through their direct-to-consumer business model. So they want to create the best optics for the job, period. Their products are backed with a lifetime, no-fault warranty and have an incredible customer experience. And I've been using the B3 8x30 binos for all my shed hunting and spring scouting missions, and the lightweight platform really makes it great for always being on me while I'm in the tree in the fall, and it doesn't get in the way with your saddle bridge or in a tree stand. It just stays tight to your body. So if you use the coupon code eastmeetswest-gift for a free gift with any full price optics order at mavenbill.com. And Spartan Forge. Hunters require an accurate forecast of the best hunting days and the best hunting spots to save time on scouting and actually executing the hunts. So the Spartan Forge outfitter utilizes years of military background and machine learning to pull from millions of data points to accurately predict deer movement. They're using science rather than someone's opinion to figure out movement for your specific hunting area. And just to give you a heads up, there's going to be some big features coming within the outfitter here shortly, and I think if you read an article that I did recently on using trail cam data and all this other stuff, if you're a geek on watching the weather and figuring out all this stuff, I can promise you that this new upgrade to the outfitter is going to be worth your while. And if you sign up now, you can, use the code EastMeetsWest to save 25% off, but you also, that gets you a locked-in price. So when it goes to increase after they add some of these additional features in here later, I think later this spring, then you're locked in. You don't have to pay any extra. So you check that out at spartanforge.ai. All right, so I want to give the Mountain Buck story of the week, otherwise known as Mountain Buck Monday, over on social media. So this one's from Will Ogden and coming out of Virginia. Will says, I've known this buck since he was a 2-year-old 9-point. Over the years, he would show up in November on an overlooked ridge adjacent to the public parking lot that always harbored a family of does. I never targeted the buck because he was either immature or I was already tagged out. This year, however, he was my main target. He showed up in early September, but he quickly vanished. Come early November, a huge fresh buck sign told me he was back. On November 16th, I set up in a bottleneck 120 yards from his suspected bedding in between him and the doe family. Just before dark, he came down the ridge perfectly to about 45 yards, and the rest is history. A 6.5-year-old public land Virginia mountain buck. And as I say every week, I'm blown away by these photos, but this deer is a giant. And if you head over to East Meets West social media pages on Instagram and Facebook and check out the photos of this deer, incredible mountain buck. I mean, just next level. But so congratulations to Will, and I appreciate him sharing the story. You can share your story. It doesn't matter if the buck's big or small. All of them are the same as far as sharing the story, and I'd love to be able to share that. We've got a ton of submissions still to go through, and I want to keep this going throughout the year. So send those over to me. All right, as far as news this week, the long haul, the Pennsylvania mountain buck hunting film just launched this past Sunday. If you haven't checked it out already, it's just over 11 minutes long. You can watch it on your lunch break. You can watch it before work, after work, whatever. I would really appreciate it if you checked it out and gave me some feedback there. I mean, I think Justin Mueller, who's been doing all my film work over the last couple of years, just absolutely killed it again. I mean, he has a way of making me look good when I'm just an average guy that likes to hunt, and he just somehow pulls it together in a way it's incredible. So this film was, how do I want to explain it? So trying to, even though I was the character in the film as far as the person that was going through this season, I think it's more of a representation of everyone that's like me, that loves hunting the challenge of these mountain bucks and the full year-round process that it comes to hopefully become successful. And also to show the hunting heritage that we have specifically within my family, but I know that runs strong in the blood of others in Pennsylvania and other areas of the country. So I really hope everyone enjoys that. And if you're listening to this up until, I believe it's the 19th, you have to head over to the video and scroll down in the description on the YouTube video, because I have a way to enter to win some great gear prizes. And some of those prizes, just to give you an idea, we have the Tethered Phantom saddle, which I mentioned earlier, Sitka Gear Fanatic hoodie, 5 Spartan Forge Outfitter memberships and hats, 5 Elite memberships to Onyx, Maven Optics apparel, Iron Will Outfitters K1 lightweight knife, and an East Meets West vintage compass shirt. So for your chance to win, you've got to like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment below, and for additional entries, if you share the video on social media and either tag myself, Beau Martonik, or East Meets West Hunt and East Meets West Outdoors on Facebook, and the winner will be chosen on February 19th. So, winners, there's going to be a bunch of winners there. So I think it's about 15 people can win some stuff, or even more. So trying to spread the love there and hopefully get a lot of people to win. I honestly really, really, really appreciate all of it. So with that being said, I hope that you enjoy this episode with Steve Sherk and helps you cure a little bit of cabin fever. Have a good rest of your week. All right, we're back for part 2. Steve Sherk, it's good to be talking to you again. We'll be getting rolling into the second part here. So
I can't wait. Let's get going.
Heck yeah, man. So on the last one, if you missed it, head back and take a listen to it. It was all about Steve's last season, some lessons that he learned, lessons hunting a specific deer in the Crazy 12, and then kind of how you're getting into scouting some new areas and old, and applying that. So I want to do this one specifically around shed hunting.
Yeah.
So the first thing I'm going to ask you about that is shed hunting something that you do specifically, or is that kind of something that happens while you're scouting? I don't know if that makes sense.
No, It's both, actually. Like most years, I'm shed hunting, but I'm more scouting. Last year I really didn't do a lot of like scouting, and I did some, but it was more I just wanted to see how many sheds I could find. And I don't know. I mean, I wasn't trying to break some record or anything, but I just thought I felt really confident last year that the areas I planned to hunt the following season, like I knew them pretty well. I knew it was so thorough. I was like, I'm just going to do more shed hunting in general than anything. This year I don't think it's going to be that way because, like I said on the last podcast, I lost quite a few of the deer that I like to hunt and that we were hunting for guiding. So this year I got to put a lot more work in. But doesn't mean you can't find sheds when you're doing that either. I mean, sometimes those areas that you're learning will be good wintering areas, and you'll still find sheds. So my eyes are going to be on the ground most of the time anyway. But and then finding a shed sometimes is a great clue and a great starting point.
Yeah.
So so I kind of go both ways. But I would say I think a lot of people enjoy shed hunting, and that's kind of what they're focused on when they're out there. But you'll gain more in your time in the woods if you're kind of shed hunting and scouting at the same time, if that makes kind of sense. So
and back to the last episode we did, the way that you go into scouting an area and trying to learn every square inch.
Yep.
That's how you're going to find sheds too.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Because you're covering all of that different ground, and so that's the way you just explained it. I think was a really good way, and I feel like I do something similar to where, like, if I'm going into a new area, I might not be looking for sheds as much as if it's an area that I've been hunting for 3 or 4 years or even 2 or 3 years. And so let's step back a little bit. So when it comes to specifically shed hunting, you can be shed hunting food sources, you can be shed hunting bedding areas, all that. What does that look like for you, and what time of year are you kind of starting that?
Sure. Well, I usually start really keep my eyes open for sheds like around this 1st of January. I have pictures of deer. I actually have one picture of a buck on November 28th this year. He had no antlers, so it can happen then. But I kind of changed what my eyes are focused on. Like this year, I started my postseason scouting the day after Christmas. And so I was like literally scouting, like trying to find bucks for a 4 or 5 day period. If you saw, like, I had a couple of videos with my cell phone of like bucks I saw scouting.
Yeah, you found some awesome.
At least a couple pretty nice ones.
Yeah.
But then once January comes, my eyes are on the ground completely. Like if there was a buck in front of me, all I see are the tracks running now. Like maybe I'll get a glimpse, but that's just kind of how I've always transitioned. I always say once January comes, my eyes are on the ground. Before January, I'm looking for deer, if that kind of makes sense. So now you probably won't see any videos of deer because literally my eyes are on the ground. So, but yeah, that's kind of, you can, even in December, you can find sheds. But the further into winter you go, the more you want to have your eyes on the ground. Let me put it to you that way.
Yeah.
So.
Definitely. Okay. When I mean, I know you said like sheds can start falling really at any time, even December, end of November as you're going through. Yep. When is the time that, well, it sounds like when you're out scouting now that you're, looking for sheds essentially, but if you were focusing on shed hunting, what types of areas are you starting first? And then how does that transition as you go through the year?
I rarely go into bedding areas at all until March, just because I really think, anywhere from 1, 2, 3 occurrences inside of a bedding area, if you're trying to get a particular buck sheds, you're really going to make it much harder because once you bump them, every deer is a little different, but anywhere from 1 to 3 times could disrupt everything for you to try to get those sheds. Like when I got Goliath sheds, a couple years ago, I was scouting day after Christmas, and I saw him, and the most perfect scenario was I kicked him out of his bed. So, and it was just the most perfect wintering spot. So I was like, you know what? I'm not going in here till spring, and I'm just going to hope and pray that those sheds will be in this area somewhere. And I was tempted in March, and I was like, nope. I was like, I'm not even going until April, because if I do bump him, it could ruin everything. Or he could run, who knows, a mile off and then drop. So, those antlers are fragile this time of year. So, so I went in there, and I don't know, it was like mid-April I went in. And honestly, there's definitely some luck and a God-given gift that day, because I'm like, all right, the first spot I'm going to look is right in that bed that he was laying in. And that is exactly where both sheds were, right in the bed.
No way.
His bed, it was like he left him there for me. So, but that was a perfect scenario of like, okay, if maybe you were out scouting right now, and maybe you didn't know a particular buck was bedding in this certain area, because in the wintertime, they can really have tight bedding. Like if they have food available, there's not much pressure. There's good thermal cover if you're up north up here where you need that. That buck may stay there all winter. So if you play your cards right and you just don't go in till the spring, there's a good chance they'll be right around there somewhere. So so your bedding areas, I would suggest no earlier than March. Doesn't hurt to go later either. It's just the later you go, the less opportunity and time. If you go in April and it's going to be fully green by late April, then who knows, you might only get a few times in there to look.
Yeah.
So, but for right now, if I was going to shed hunt, I would just be food sources entirely. Or if I know for sure where the bedding is, anywhere but the bedding. Maybe the travel routes from bedding to food, or they're probably okay. But it's that bedding area where they're spending their daytime you got to stay out of. Time of year.
What if you got, say, you were looking for a certain buck, and your cameras, whether it be a cell camera, a regular cell camera, showed you on a travel route that he had dropped already. Say you could tell by cutting the ears, body or something. Then would you go into the bedding earlier?
Oh, I would, and I have that scenario right now. Like I have a really big buck that dropped both antlers. He dropped one he dropped one about 10 days ago, and then another one just maybe 4 days ago. He dropped them both in, like a 10-day stretch. But he's hanging with 3 other bucks. And even though he's the biggest, like I did look some this week and where he's been feeding in that and some of the trails to and from bedding. But I didn't find the antlers in those areas. Maybe that doesn't mean they're not there either, but I'm not going in the bedding area because I'd also like to not disturb that and maybe get some of those other antlers.
Yeah.
So if he's all by himself and, or maybe you don't care about the other bucks, like, I just want his, and there's no problem, because even if you bother a bedding area this time of year and you think that might be a bedding area for next hunting season, you're not going to hurt it for next hunting season.
Yeah.
But it just depends on the situation. But I truly believe too much time in a bedding area now, you will ruin your chances.
Yeah, I could definitely agree with that. And it's tough with other people being out and everything, and you start seeing boot tracks in areas, and that always makes it kind of tough. But you gotta stick to your guns. I think like the way I think about it is the same thing with when you're talking about hunting, say, bigger deer, and it's in a pressured area, you're like, well, I just shot this because another person would shoot it anyways. That's the wrong mentality.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, that's definitely a possibility. But if you stick to your guns, you have a better chance than if you didn't. So it's all about playing the odds there. And
no, I always try to. I never think about like another hunter shooting any deer unless I have seen the deer myself dead or seen the pictures. Like, you have to kind of just block out. You have to pay attention where other hunters are hunting, but you can't let that like bother you, because what it can do is frustrate you it messes with your confidence, and you just got to forget about that and just focus, just keep grinding, on that particular deer. No, because, a lot of the listeners are going to be public land hunters, and I don't care where you hunt public land. Maybe some places get more hunting pressure than others, but you're always going to deal with other hunters. So you just got to let that be part of the game. And like I said, just block some of it out and just keep going after it.
Yeah, I agree with that point. Yep. And because like you said, it could screw with your confidence. And we were talking about my buddy Johnny Stewart the other day, and he always says he has some buddies that get worked up about other hunters, and he's like, they're too worried about hunting people than the deer. You got to focus on hunting the deer.
Exactly.
It is what it is. And if there's people there, go somewhere else or go near.
Or at least a mile or two away. There's a good chance, that those deer aren't going to be right where all the people are, anyways.
Yeah, it was funny the other day. My dad was out scouting in a food source, and he had saw boot tracks. So he was staying away. He's like, that guy would have picked up anything that would have been there, and he came back across the boot tracks, and just so happened that there was a shed laying there right next to the boot tracks.
Wow.
It must have fell either after, or he said the snow melted enough that it was able, because it was hard to see. But he's like, so sometimes you can't be totally deterred by people when it comes into an area.
Especially in a big woods, it's different if you're hunting like fields where you could just get some binoculars and glass the whole field. But I can't tell you how many times I've pounded an area before and then go through it again, and I know that shed was there, but it's not like these things are glowing.
No.
And
it's literally like a needle in a haystack.
Yeah, exactly. So no, you definitely, I wouldn't worry about, people, shed hunt in certain areas. Especially if you know that there's some big deer wintering in that area, you still got to go anyways. Now maybe, because of social media, if there's a particular deer and obviously you see that they then okay, no sense wasting your time if they find the antlers. But no, I just block all that stuff out, and I'm willing to share the ground, and I just try to do my own thing.
Do you ever find where a certain deer will drop his antlers year after year in the same general area, like they has a wintering area?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so there was this buck that it was probably 4 or 5 years ago now, that between myself and my family, we had 5 years of sheds off of it, and he always dropped within, this was a tight area, within 200 yards of each other, and he always dropped both at the same time.
Yeah, what is happening there is, like I said before, a wintering deer wants to move as little as possible. So if that same area where he's been wintering has everything he needs to survive, if he only even has to move a couple 100 yards a day to survive, he's going to do that. The less calories he has to burn to get through the winter, the better for him, and he knows that. So if it's a good prime area for a winter survival, there's a good chance that spot is going to hold that buck every year, and he's probably going to drop right in there.
So do you think food's the biggest thing for wintering areas, or
food? I think food, and if it is really winter like we have right now, I think the thermal cover is really important, like the hemlock and pine and that. And but sometimes if you have all that mixed in, like if you got food tight to that, you don't have much pressure. They feel safe. Because one thing I've noticed too, if an area got a lot of hunting pressure in gun season, and then I go in there in shed season, I'll find the bedding is still pushed way back from the food still, like those deer are still spooked, even though, there's not anyone hunting, but they saw all that pressure in gun season that, they'll still be bedding usually way back from the access area. Mm-hmm. But if there wasn't much pressure and it has the bedding cover, the food all close together, then those sheds should be right in there. And those are the best places to find sheds.
Yeah.
Makes the ball game a lot easier.
Definitely. With so when it comes to food, what are some of the food sources that you're keying in on?
Sure. I know before we even started the podcast, obviously we talked about acorns. I think acorns in the big woods are your best source, but obviously we know that acorns aren't available everywhere, and deer don't just eat acorns. I think the absolute best area to count on for sheds every year is going to be like young clear-cut area mixed with like hemlock evergreen, because a lot of times when they log an area, they don't cut the hemlock because there's no use for it.
Yep.
So they'll leave the hemlock standing, but if there's like a ton of like blackberry browse mixed in there, those bucks will hardly even leave that cut. So those clear cuts with that, type of winter cover, you'll find loads of sheds in there every year. But the situation is that's another scenario where you don't want to go too early, because those deer are bedding and feeding in the same spot within the cover. So you wouldn't want to go in there till probably, at least March or April. Yeah. And then you got to hope that, because it's public land, that nobody else is going in there ahead of you, because shed hunting's getting more popular, and I feel like you get a sense of like everyone's trying to beat someone to an area now.
Yeah.
So that's the situation you run into. Hopefully, you have some places that other people don't know, but that would be the most ideal winter food source is browse. Browse are mainly really good in the winter because it takes very little energy to eat browse, rather than if there's acorns or food underneath the snow, the deer have to dig to find it. And sometimes they're burning up more energy to get to the food than what it's really going to give back. So browse is really good. And
well, hold on one second, Steve. To that point about like those newer logging cuts, one that I've found, like say really fresh logging cuts, like they're actively logging an area.
Oh yeah,
it can be super good. Which what I like the benefit of that is, even though there's that cover that's in there from the tops and everything, they're not typically bedding in there if the loggers are in there during the day, so they're just coming in at night. Once they're done, then that could be both a food and bedding area. But to be able to that helps out a lot. I like those types of areas. And then also what you're saying about like saying have the hemlocks mixed in with those newer spots. How I know I can just, we haven't even talked about this, but I have a feeling you do this. If you see a lone hemlock in the middle of a cut, you got to check under it.
Oh, I literally, like, if I pull into a spot, I'm picking out all the hemlock. And you'll see my boots go this hemlock, that hemlock. You have to, because there'll be a bed almost under every one of them.
I love those spots. My dad taught me that young, and I see it all the time. And I could tell when someone's shed hunting that knows that same thing, because you'll watch their boot tracks beat me to that hemlock.
And one thing too about that, this is kind of a theory of mine, is I found a lot of sheds in beds or right beside a bed, and I think, a lot of times in the winter when a buck gets up, he'll do like a big shake. He'll shake his head, he'll shake his whole body, shaking snow and moisture and whatever. But that's a perfect scenario for those antlers to drop. So that's why, I find a lot of sheds in feeding areas, but bedding areas actually may be better, because they're, that's just one. Think about it. If those horns maybe are just a little loose and ready to come off, there's videos that prove when a buck drops his antlers, he shakes his head now. Like, you see that. That big shake could definitely be what knocks those antlers off. So you got to check wherever you think that deer might be bedding, like especially under those hemlocks that you were talking about.
I saw last year, I was in March, and I jumped a buck that still had his antlers. He was actually bedded in this like real thick, swampy creek bottom, and he jumped up and took off, and he's going through all these like sapling trees, and I'm like, looking like we're trying to see if he dropped them, but he didn't. And it's funny, but any kind of jolt or stuff like that by shaking their heads and
I don't really know for sure, like if their body literally says, all right, it's time to drop. I feel like they just feel it's starting to get like not as good of a connection and a wobbly feeling. This is just my theory. Could be wrong. But all of a sudden, it just doesn't feel right up there, and they shake. So
I agree with that. All right, so I cut you off there when you're about to talk into some other different food sources.
So I talk to a lot of hunters that say, Steve, there's not an oak tree anywhere I hunt. What do the deer eat? The thing is they eat way more than what any of us would ever think. Especially this time of year, they're eating things that might not even be much value for them, but they're going to be nibbling on something every day. But one of the things I find more in the winter, especially if it's an area that hasn't had good logging, or maybe there's high deer numbers and there's not good available browse, is they'll be digging up bulbs. A lot of it is fern bulbs. I've seen many posts before, like on Facebook and Instagram. Someone's like, "What the heck are these deer doing? The ground is just shredded up here." Mm-hmm. And that's what they're doing is they're digging up bulbs, and there actually is nutrients in the bulbs, like how we might, I'm a landscaper, so I might put bulbs in for someone. Maybe they want tulips the next year. Well, yeah, okay, maybe we don't really have much for tulips in the woods, but most of your perennial plants have a bulb that comes up every year. So the deer know that, and they dig sometimes inches deep into the ground to get those bulbs. So if you're out shed hunting and you see an area all torn up and just to the dirt, those are places where the deer are spending time feeding, and they will actually go back to that spot. Like, I've noticed many times where, it wasn't a one-time occurrence. There was something in the ground there, some kind of bulb that, they might go back there 2 or 3 times to dig them all up. Yep. Just how we would dig up leeks or something like that. Yep. So that's something very key for the wintertime.
Yeah, that's a real, because how many times do you come across an area where a whole hillside's just tore up, and you're like, what are they eating?
Yep. And they're not actually eating the fern itself. They rarely eat fern they're eating the bulb that the fern is coming up out of the next year. There's a good chance you won't see many ferns in that little spot next year because they ate all the bulbs.
That definitely makes sense. Yeah, and also, have you ever seen dewberries and stuff, mostly clear cuts and stuff, and the red vines and everything that they seem to love to dig in the openings within the clear cuts or on the logging roads?
And the reason why you also see a lot of digging in clear cuts is you have more sunlight, which is more stuff to grow. It's not just the browse that they eat. They're eating, like I said, the stuff that's already in the ground that's in a bulb form that's going to come up the next year. So, they know to dig that up. One thing, I don't do a lot of shed hunting in an area where there's a lot of oak trees that don't produce, because what I've learned is an oak, its canopy is so wide, and wherever you have oak, you don't have a lot of understory. Mm-hmm. So you want to be in places where the understory of the trees is not real wide and where there's more sunlight. That's where deer are going to feed a lot in the winter if they don't have good browse sources. Yeah. So I'm not a big believer in, I hunt Allegheny State Park in New York where there's no logging at all. Never can be done there. And it's just big old woods, and I'm not a big believer that deer can hardly survive if they don't have the most perfect world to live in. There's no browse in places over there, but there's deer every year. Maybe they're not the healthiest deer, but deer are going to survive almost anywhere you put them. And you just have to know, because I have people say, well, Steve, there's no logging where I hunt. There's no clear cuts. How do I hunt that? Well, the deer are going to have, they're going to have their habits and food sources wherever they live. It's just, you just got to get to know that area.
Yep. So pay attention to what they're digging up and stuff. And I'll tell you, there's probably more times than not, I'm not sure exactly what they're eating, but I can just you can kind of visualize the area and these type of areas, they're digging something up. I'm not even close to knowing anything as far as plants. It's been one of the things the last couple of years I've been trying to learn more of the plants in the woods and understanding. I learned that in school, in high school, when I had Voag class, and we learned all the different plants, but I didn't pay attention enough to have it really sink in, and
I hear you on that.
So when you're saying about leeks and how we picked those, there was a few years ago that we had a stretch in January that got really warm, and I think it felt like it it made the leeks start to come up early.
Oh, yeah.
And I found a bunch of sheds in those leeks. Yeah.
They might have even been eating either the green or digging them. Yeah.
Yeah. And I found, and that doesn't happen all the time, but just like kind of noticing those types of things. Yeah. Or if it's a winter where, like even like now, or if, say you get a hard like freeze over where it's hard for them to dig, spring seeps.
Yeah.
That last year, and it wasn't a tough winter, but I found a lot of sheds in spring seeps.
Especially if there was acorns in an area and it's froze over really bad, all the seeps will be pounded with deer sign because once again, I brought it up before, it's all about energy this time of year. They're not doctors or scientists or whatever, but Mother Nature tells them, is it worth going for this food source or not? Because if they put in so much energy and don't get enough in return, their bodies already know, okay, it's not worth it. Mm-hmm. So those seeps, it takes hardly any energy to just go in there and grab the acorns or whatever is available to eat. They don't have to hardly dig. So yeah, that's a great point. But one thing too that you brought up, I've noticed like every year, if I find, say like you said, you notice where they're feeding on leeks, I find that relevant in a lot of different areas. Like, okay, this year maybe we didn't have a good acorn crop, but I'm finding a lot where this food source is. Or then you want to think of other areas. Okay, where is that food source? And then search those areas. It kind of seems like every year there's something that the deer are mostly keying on, and you can use that in wherever you go.
Yeah.
Yep.
I totally agree. And so one thing I just thought of is I've had someone call me out on this before. So I guess the term leeks is really generalized to our area, northern Pennsylvania. Even southern Pennsylvania, they call them ramps.
Yeah, ramps. Yep.
So they're a wild onion, basically, is
exactly
what we're discussing here. But I always forget about that because like we have our own terms about things, and in other areas, like, what the hell are they talking about?
And another thing, too, we talked about, like, it's really cool to learn what deer eat. Like, I would question most people, when you watch deer from your stand, do you really pay attention to what they're doing? Like, I try to, anytime I see a deer, I love to watch what it's eating. Sometimes I'll see a deer, like, nip on some funky plant I didn't even know, so then I'll go, like, take a picture of it and then try to look it up online, and right there you learn something. I remember one time, I didn't even know deer ate mushrooms until I watched it happen. Like, there's all these mushrooms growing around the base of this tree, and this little buck came over in front of me, and he probably ate like 30 mushrooms. There wasn't a mushroom left on this tree. But, like, that day I learned something.
Yeah.
In the big woods, like, and I know everywhere, but especially in the big woods, it's just like sometimes it's just survival. Whatever is available, they eat. But they do know, like, if there's acorns or there's mushrooms, I'm pretty sure they're not going to be eating mushrooms.
Yeah.
It's like if you go to a buffet, are you going to get 5 salads or are you going to get 5 rounds of, say they might have prime rib available too? They're the same way. So you kind of have to know the area and know what's available.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Yep.
That's so true because I've been in areas in north central PA, a lot east of where we're at, that don't have much cuttings and stuff, and I'll see them even eating the bark off of trees.
Yeah,
and shaving it, and I hate those areas. I just try to stay. I like to have more food sources if possible, but it's just interesting. They'll always find a way, like you said, to survive.
Yeah,
and be able to do that.
Yeah, this time of year though, whatever the best food source is available is going to be where most of the deer are at. So I think for shed hunting, that's, even though I said, a bedding area may be the best place to find a shed, because I think a deer may be bedding more now throughout even a 24-hour day. There may be more time in a bed now than there is in a food source. I'm going to say you might have a deer bedding 12, 15, or in a bedding area 12, 15 hours a day at least right now, and then go out and feed a little bit, because when they're bedding, they're still preserving more energy moving around. So the bedding areas are probably a little better, but if you still know the best food source in that area, that's still a really good place to find those sheds too.
Yep.
Knowing that best food source.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, do you So do you any of the areas that you scout, shed hunt, do you have any like swampy type areas at all, or is it mostly mountainous type stuff?
Yeah, all mine's mountainous. I would love to hunt swamps or spend. I've heard there's so much out there on swamps. I'm so attracted to it. I don't really have that type of the area where I live. But I would just, if you want to touch more on it than me, I would totally think that a swamp could be a great wintering area. I would think, especially if it's mixed with some evergreen.
Yeah,
it's probably a really good wintering area.
It's what I was gonna say was some of the areas that I hunt that don't have like really big steep hills and they might have like say more of a shallower valley that aren't as much elevation difference. Those swamps, those open areas in the swamps, shed magnets. I mean, they really spend a lot of wintering time. Like you said, if they're mixed with hemlocks, they have the cover there. They'll eat. There's grasses that are in the swamp. I don't know the specific types of grasses, but there's grasses in there, and I seem to find some there. And I also have noticed that if it's a harder winter, they seem to be focused more in those swamps, probably because it's wetter and they can dig things up or do anything where. So that seems to depend year to year too on what the winter looks like and depending on where they're spending that time.
And I'm a big believer. I think February, March, I think are the main shed months when bucks drop their antlers. So you also have to pay attention to how the winter is throughout the year. Like if it's a really mild winter, it's actually harder to find sheds, in my opinion, because the deer can be in a lot of different places. But a harder winter is going to pocket deer better. So, maybe like right now, winter, as far as I know, is starting to get kind of bad. So really, I think it will be easier to find sheds this winter because the deer are going to be more concentrated. Except where it will probably backfire is if we have 20 inches of snow that's out there right now and that doesn't melt till April, then we're not going to have the actual time to find them. A lot of them will be buried. But when you do get that time out there, you should be getting batches rather than maybe one shed every 3 days. So paying attention to the weather and how severe your winter is also going to really determine, how good of a shed season it's going to be if the deer are spread out or concentrated.
So say you have some food sources identified, bedding areas that you want to go in there to shed hunt. What's your strategy as far as going in looking specifically for sheds? Are you grid searching the areas? Are you walking trails? What does that kind of look like?
What I try to do is, I'll zigzag. If I see a really good trail, I'll follow it. I think the best way is to not bounce around too much, like pick an area and then don't go anywhere for your next 3 or 4 times until you feel you have it covered. And you don't want to go too early. Like, if it's like middle of March and I would say 80 or 90% of the bucks have dropped, I feel like that's the time to just pick an area. And if you have a weekend or whatever, then we're only going to this area and we're just going to spend 2 full days in here and cover every inch of it. Trails and the food sources and this and that you go through first, but they're not. Sometimes I just find sheds and unexpected, like he was just randomly walking here and he dropped. To really gather up the sheds in that area, you got to cover almost all of it. So it's just, if you're just sweeping through areas, you won't be a guy that's going to have bundles of sheds. You got to cover areas thoroughly.
Well, I always laughed at because this is where I'm terrible at it because I get I'm like, oh, I want to go look over here. I want to go do this, and I never can. I would laugh because say I'd come out with anywhere from 15 to 20 sheds a year would be like my average, and then I look at my dad that finds 60 to 70 because he's more patient with being able to cover all of the area than I am, and but now with focusing on smaller areas, I have more time to be able to do that. So I'm hoping that I pick up some more sheds in the process. But it's I'm glad you say that because I know you find quite a few sheds, and I look at when I talk to a bunch of different people, and the ones that seem to be really good at finding sheds have that similar strategy. Thorough.
That's what you have to do.
Attention to detail. type of stuff. So.
Yep. But then you also just got to know for sure what's a good area. Like, I've been doing it more. I think other guys have. Like, for my shed hunting, I'm running a lot of cameras as if I was hunting the deer now. Because, like, you'll find areas where it looks like, there was a lot of wintering activity. And if you didn't have cameras there, you'd be surprised. There's some areas where it's just mainly does, in there. Or they might have only been in there in December and January, then they shifted and you had no clue. So all the sign was there, but it's really tough to tell whether that sign was made in January or February.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why running cameras, if you really want to get serious about finding sheds, I would totally say, run a lot of cameras in those areas. That will give you the right intel.
Are you running cameras on like trails, food sources, bedding?
Almost all mine has been on food sources, just because I didn't want to bother the bedding and screw anything up.
Yep.
But I've been getting a ton of pictures in food sources, and it's really neat. This time of year, it's almost like I kind of wish I could hunt because the pattern is just crazy easy right now. It's like food to bed. And some of the bucks I get on the same trail almost every day. It's like, it seems like it could be an easy time of year. And I'm not ever going to say it's truly easy, but much easier. This time of year, if you have a good bedding area and a good feeding area, and maybe they're not that far apart, I really think you could peg a buck right now.
Yeah.
That's what's neat about it.
Yeah, I normally don't run much cameras as far as for sheds, but this year I moved some around, and it was snow, so I could see these like just cow paths of trails that were going in. And like I'd have my camera, say it was 30 yards away, and the scrape that I had it on isn't on, like I say, a primary trail or whatever. It's all snow covered, and I haven't had a deer in a month on that camera, but only 30 yards away can be
exactly
pretty good. So
no, that's why I would totally recommend, if say you're a guy that's like, well, I left my cameras out, but they're, most people put their cameras on scrapes. Well, if you were really trying to get good intel for this time of year, I don't think scrapes is going to get you the best that you can get. I really think focusing on that food to bedding pattern, whether you're on the trails or in the food, probably not the bedding, but, from outside of the bedding or in the food is where you want your cameras right now, not so much on the scrapes.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Like I said, most of the time I leave mine out just from the standpoint of just not getting out to move them or do anything. And they will hit licking branches. You're a big proponent of that too. Yeah. But it's not as often.
Yeah, you won't get.
It's not your best odds.
Exactly. Nope, that's the perfect way to put that.
So I guess I think that covers most of everything with sheds. Do you have anything else to add that you can think of? That's all the questions.
I always kind of just go back and recap to make sure everybody kind of got what I was trying to explain to say. So, one thing I notice every year, it just seems like everyone's super anxious to shed hunt, and like I look and I see like guys like, oh, I'm already up to like 10 or 12, and I'm not trying to compete with anyone, but it does make you like push to do it a little sooner. There's nothing wrong with doing it soon, but like we talked about before, is you just got to be real careful where you're putting your efforts. Right now is because you can totally blow opportunities in your numbers if you're going into the wrong areas this early. So there's really nothing wrong with going out right now early if you just play your cards right. But then like I said, you just got to be real careful and just avoid those bedding areas. And even though if you wait till March or April, you're much better just backing out, because those sheds are probably not going anywhere unless you do have a lot of hunters in your area. So just don't get too caught up in what everyone, their numbers. And I've only found one so far this year, and I've been in the woods probably every day, but like 2 since after Christmas.
Yeah.
My eyes are on the ground. I'm not saying I'm always for sure in the best place to find a shed, but I'm not too worried about even how. I don't have a goal to find so many this year, but I'm I'm not over anxious about doing it. And I think that's, if we're talking this time of year, just be patient and, don't ruin the best time is yet to come.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, I like I said, I agree with that. I struggle with the point too of, and just even cabin fever wanting to do that. So like, again with your recap there, if I'm gonna be going out right now, I'm trying to focus on more of the food sources and areas where I don't think they're spending time in the daylight.
And I can promise, like, over the years I've went into some food sources like 2-3 days in a row and had cameras there, and those deer know that I'm there, but it doesn't bother them at all. They may come in even later, but I'm totally fine with them coming in at night right now, as long as they keep coming back.
Yeah.
So you can, I heard someone say, you shouldn't be out there at all this time of year. And maybe in certain areas where the deer are really congested and they can see the food source from where they're bedding. But as long as there's some distance, between food and bedding, there really shouldn't be hardly an issue with going in those food sources this time of year.
Yeah, you and I agree definitely on that point. So, this time of year, I always joke. It's like, you and I were texting the other day. I was like trying to get work done around the house and do all that kind of stuff to get my mind off of just taking a little bit of a break if possible,
Yep. And one thing too, I'll bring up, not really related to shed hunting, but someone like me, I'll be honest, like the only time I have to work this time of year is if it's snowing out. So if it doesn't snow, I'm in the woods, and even every day if I do have to plow snow, I'm usually done by like noon. So I feel like some people can look at me and be like, to have a certain success, I need to be out there as much as Steve because he's out there every day. And I would tell people to, you just got to focus on what you're able to do. There's people that have, a bunch of kids and sports and all this and that, like, and those are all good things, but you don't have to, you never want to try to compare and like, the only way I'm going to have success is if I go out every day. All I would say is when you get a chance, when that I have some time to do some scouting, just get out there at every chance you can get. But I'm not saying you have to go every day or, sure, it will help, but, just don't pay attention and be like it's a competition or you have to be at a certain level, because not everyone's capable of doing some of the things that I do. I know you even said earlier, like, Steve, I know you're in the woods every day, and I'm not trying to outdo anyone, but I got the time.
Yeah.
I'm just fortunate.
Everyone's different. And I still am pissed that they didn't tell me in high school that if I wanted to hunt, I should have been a landscaper.
I don't know. Like I said, I'm super blessed, and part of the reason why I do things like this is, okay, maybe I know whoever that's listening today can't be out there as much as me, but maybe my experiences and my time, I can give something back. And like I said, I'm not trying to make myself look good, but I am just, if I can help someone, a guy that's working 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, God bless you. I'd be glad to help you in some kind of way. So, that's just how life is. But this is also a time of year when we can be sitting at home and, winter sports are going on, and maybe the desire to be out there isn't as much, but that's where you really gotta, you gotta keep the flame burning when you can this time of year, even though a lot of us aren't thinking about deer hunting. But if you can get out there, by all means, make sure you're putting some time in the off season.
Yeah. I think you definitely hit a home run there at the end, Steve. And, and I know for one, and I'm sure the listeners appreciate the information you're putting out there. We're all trying to help each other out and do better. And it's one of those things. Every once in a while I'll get a message where people are mad, say I'm talking about something that was like a secret or whatever it is. But it's like, honestly, it's the people, if someone's listening to this, normally they want to make themselves better. They're the ones that are putting in the work. The lazy people aren't going to do the work anyway. So if you can help the good people out, why not?
Oh, and what we have to, I know a lot of us get to a certain level and we've learned so much that it's like we have to keep it all in for ourselves. But what you have to remember is there's a lot of new hunters out there that are just learning. And if we don't have people like us sharing knowledge and helping, then what's the future going to be like with hunting? We're already being attacked from every direction. So we have to be sharing this knowledge. Like I said, I don't say everything, but I think I say enough to help people, and I know you're the same way.
Yep.
People turn on most of the time on the East Meet West podcast, it's going to be, you're going to learn something. It's not just some plain old story that, Beau shoots another buck, or you're going to, if you do shoot a buck or whoever you interview, it's all about how it happened and how someone else can have that same opportunity.
Yep. And if you can pull one thing out of this and it helps you out, then that's a win.
Absolutely. So no, like I said, I don't get too caught up in. So I'm just like you. People will say, Steve, you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. You're ruining it for everyone else. But in the long run, I'm helping way more than what I'm hurting.
Yep.
So, and I'm not going to change.
I love that. So, Steve, where can people again find you again?
Sure. So I have a Facebook page. Just look up Sherk's Guide Service, SHERK''S, or Instagram is the same, or sherksguideservice.com.
And you're booked for this year already.
Yep, I'm completely
fully
booked.
So are you taking people to book as far as hunts with you for next year already, or no?
I don't want to do that because the people that have been, especially some, have been coming religiously for years, and I would never want to cancel out a guy that's been coming and giving me his business for years, and I'm expecting him to come next year. So I leave all those spots open. And then, if people, I know it's a long time from now, but usually I try to round everyone up like right after gun season, mid to late December. And if there's any spots available, I'll post them then. Or, it's not for sure. It's not 100% sure. Things can happen from now till hunting season. There probably will be some openings that come up. And, I wish I could take on more people, but this isn't a business that I'm just trying to grow. I have a certain amount of people that I feel I can take out a year, and I don't want to take out any more than that because, these woods are fragile. I also don't want to see any more deer killed than what we killed this year. I try to have a number. This would be about a limit, and just because I never want to ruin such a good thing that I already have.
Yeah.
So, and I know there's other hunters out there that hunt these areas. So, I never want to push other people away. And unfortunately, I think it's going to be tough for, to get hunts with me in the future. And by all means, if there's an opening for a new person, I will gladly. I always want to take new people, but I really have to take care of the people that come every year. That's just how business works. Yep. They I owe that to them.
Yep, I definitely respect that and respect your thoughts on it. You're not trying to just make the most money.
No,
you just want to.
God, no.
No,
I kid you not. If I was to bring a number out, I could easily book 100 people a year. That's no exaggeration. I turn down people every day, but I would never want to do that on a public land, and because honestly, it is somewhat about the money, but the money that I'm making is plenty. I'm just good with the way it is, and I hope through things like that we do today that people may not need a guide, and it's very easy to do it yourself if you're willing to put the time in. So I wish those people the best luck, and through what I can give today and what you give on all these podcasts, I just hope that those kind of people are listening and that they can be successful as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Steve, again for coming on. And we'll hopefully we don't have so much time in between seeing each other and we can hang out again soon.
Sounds good, bud. Can't wait.
See ya.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.